Stay.
Stay.
So, I should tell you, our topic today being Have a Beer for Jesus, that Jim was correct. Beer at Summerfest is now $7, which is at least $2 more than I'm willing to pay, but we talked about it and we decided that people who were the really heavy hitters at Summerfest, the $1 increase really only cost them $20. So all things are relative, right? Our topic today actually attracted some attention. Through a search of meetup.com, I was contacted by a reporter from the Journal Sentinel who's doing an article on spiritual groups that meet in bars and other places to have a drink. And you know, I told him that while we weren't opposed to that, I told him we talked about doing that, maybe starting in the fall one night, starting to drink at 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. It was probably a little early for a lot of us, but not necessarily for all of us. But it brings up that thing in this topic. The reason that I chose Have a Beer for Jesus, of course, as the topic today is because Jesus is talking about, on the one hand, the truth that some people are never happy no matter what you do. That John the Baptist came, and John the Baptist was, he fasted, he didn't drink, he was everything evangelical fundamentalism would love, except he dressed a little raggy and had a strange diet. And Jesus came and ate and drank with people at the other end of the spectrum, and both of them took heat from the religious authorities of the day. And sometimes we can really start to believe what we hear people say about what Jesus wanted. It can be easy if you hear enough people say, oh, Jesus doesn't want you to drink, smoke, play cards, dance, go to movies, or have any fun at all unless it's absolutely accidental, and if that should happen, you should end it as soon as possible. And yet, the other end of the story is, in truth, who did he hang out with? He hung out with everybody the religious authorities of his day had a problem with. And you simply can't have that both ways. You can't both be saying he didn't do anything and he ticked people off for what he did. That comes down to us 2 millennia later in this idea that, well, 2 ideas really. The first is that somehow there's something you have to not do, or some things you have to not do in order to be okay. And we're going to define okay as not just acceptable by whatever your understanding of God might be, but even acceptable to your society. So there's a whole list of things that good people don't. Good people don't do this, good people don't do this, good people don't do that. When it comes right down to it, good people don't do too much at all. They pretty much sit at home and they're pretty boring and nobody wants to be around them. And it can turn into this sort of self-sacrificing notion that says somehow if I don't do things, I'm going to be okay. And of course, that's a downward spiral. That's a downward spiral that says I'm not supposed to live. And what's the reward for not living? Well, if you are a biblical literalist, the reward for not living is that you'll get to go to heaven and be in church all day. I mean, essentially that's the description, right? You get to go, yeah, pearly gates, play harps, dress in white robes, and just worship God all day. Well, I don't know about you, and I'm a spiritual nerd, right? But the last thing I want to do is sit in church all day, not just today, but throughout eternity. And I think if that was really what it was, there'd be a whole lot of people who would get there and say, now wait, you mean I didn't have any fun for this? So, the second thing that happens is that spirituality becomes like a gas station. In fact, it's not spirituality, it's religion. And I started finally, at long last, reading this book. I don't pronounce Irish names very well, but I think his name is pronounced Dermot O'Murku or something like that, called Quantum Theology. And he's an Irish Roman Catholic priest. And he says that religion is what humanity does when it wants to control God. And spirituality is what humanity does when it wants to make sense of the world that it lives in. And that there's no reason that religion couldn't have spirituality too, but it doesn't necessarily. And so if you look at that idea that religion is what we do when we try to control God, that's where you get all this stuff, right? Don't drink, don't dance, don't smoke, don't have fun, have sex only in the missionary position, and then only to procreate, and if at all possible, don't enjoy it. Because if we do these things, if we buy into this, right, now God will have no choice but to let us into heaven where we can go to church all day for eternity, and won't that be fun? On the other hand, if spirituality is something that we use to make sense of the world we live in, now we have something different. If religion is what we're after, we show up on Sunday morning, and depending on the tradition, maybe Sunday afternoon, Sunday night, Wednesday evening, every Friday in Lent or whatever, and we sort of get filled up. It's like going to the gas station, somebody sticks the hose in us, depending on tradition, sometimes quite literally, and fills us up, and then we go about our way all week, right? We go on our merry way, and that's supposed to last us. And if we're lucky, what we're really after is like it's a religious monopoly game, and we might get out of hell free card. Right? If we don't, we can't pass go or collect $200 on our way. Yeah. Spirituality, on the other hand, says if we're making sense of life, then you can't really segment it into a corner. Now, there might be something special you do. In fact, and I have to look at his name, I'm sorry. Jagda Tulku Rinpoche, talking about practice being important. That you need a spiritual practice. And I'm going to say, because I am who I am, it doesn't really matter what it is. I mean, what makes you happy? What really excites you? Maybe your spiritual practice is walking in nature. Maybe, God forbid, watch out now, if lightning should come down, you don't want distance. What if spiritual practice is a round of golf? I mean, it could.
My dad.
Yeah, and why not?
That's where he does it.
Because what do you do when you play golf? Although there was a book written about golf a few years ago called A Good Walk Spoiled. And that was my experience of golf. Golf is a nice walk spoiled by the fact that you're chasing this little ball, all around.
Just to hit it again.
Just to hit it again and lose it again. And I actually had a time when I was golfing where I got the great idea that I wouldn't lose as many balls if I got orange balls. Which was great until fall.
Oh, oops.
When the leaves fell. And now I really wish that I had a white ball, because the orange ball looked like every leaf that had fallen. But why is it golf spirituality? What are you doing? You're mindful, not just of what you're doing, but of your body. You're getting a little exercise that's good for you. You're out golf courses are beautiful places if you get past the profanity. But people like me looking for their orange balls.
Well, at least they weren't blue ones.
At least they weren't. And they're blue leaves, so we're lucky. Ram Dass tells the story of having decided to take up golf again. Because now his father, they had a place in New Hampshire, and there was like a farm. And his father had a little 3-hole golf course put in. So when Ram Dass was young, he played golf. But then, he went to India and started taking acid, and it's harder to hit the ball when it melts. So he didn't do a lot of golfing on the acid, but then he decided later in life that he would start golfing again. So he took some lessons, and he eventually went out with his instructor, who was a younger woman, and he's now 60. And the balls that he bought were $1 a piece, and this would have been probably in the 90s. So not terribly expensive, but it's a buck. But he hit a ball and he shanked it into the woods, and So he just hit another one, which sometimes you do. You say, I'm not going to chase that ball. But he was feeling so young and spry because he actually beat his instructor on some holes. He forgot how old he was. And he decided to go, after the last hole, running off into the woods to get the ball that he had lost, and ended up slipping and falling and wiping out and finding his instructor, who he had been feeling all manly about, standing over him and saying, oh my God, are you all right? And so see, sometimes golf is intensely spiritual because it brings us back to the reality of our circumstance as we lay on the ground looking out. But if that's what does it for you, then I say do it, and do it regularly. If it's meditation, I think that's great. If it's not, I think that's great too. If it's mantra practice, I think that's beautiful. If it's going to Mass every day, and that really does it for you, I say take off and let me know how it was. But the point is, it has to be something. So, why is Christianity imploding? Well, one of the reasons, I believe, is that Christianity no longer offers us, for the most part, it's not universally true, spiritual practice. What does it say? Come plug in on Saturday morning, or Sunday morning. Bring your Prius, plug it into the outlet, get it juiced up for the week, and off you go. You can't transform your life that way. You can't even get a habit that way. Depending on who you talk to, it takes about 30 days of doing something daily to develop a habit. And if you're doing something once a week, you're never going to get there. And then if you do try it that way, what happens? Well, for the most part, right? And some places there's some gymnastics involved. Stand up, sit down, fight, right? Sometimes there's some dancing and sprinting up and down the aisle, but that's just a few select people that get to do that. And you're hearing something that you don't care about because it isn't real. In fact, you're going to have to ignore a lot of it because what's it telling you? Don't do the things you like to have fun doing. Well, when I was first studying and discerning whether I was real, I knew I was called to ministry, but where I was called, they said, oh, you have to pray the daily office every day. And if you're not familiar with that, it's basically saying a bunch of written prayers. Depending on the tradition, you might call it morning prayer and evening prayer, you might call it matins and vespers, you might, but you're reading prayers out of a book, and there's nothing wrong with it, and for a while it was really feeding me, but then after a while, it didn't anymore. And there's even times I go back to it. But that's the other thing about spiritual practice. And a lot of traditional teachers from a lot of traditions will not tell you this. There may be things that feed you for a while, and then they just leave you flat. So, I like to take the train. And unless you're just going to Chicago or something, it's almost impossible to take the train and just have one. In fact, if you're going south, you will always have two trains if you're going beyond Chicago because the train doesn't plow through the station. You don't take the train to Chicago and go, well, and get off in or sit on in Chicago and go, you know, somebody told me this was the train I had to take to get to Texas. And by God, I'm not getting off this train until it arrives in Texas. Right? No, you get off the train, you go find the one in Texas and get on that one. But somebody gives you spiritual practice and says, this is your spiritual practice. And we get in this place where we say, well, somebody told me this was the one. Right? So this is the one I'm going to do. It doesn't feed me. I hate every minute of it. I'm filled with resentment and loathing. I'm tired of chasing golf balls through the woods. But I won't let go of it. Why? Well, because I've fallen into that place where I think by doing this I can control God. I'm building the resume, right? So when I get to the pearly gates, and heaven is a gated community because it's in a bad neighborhood. And St. Peter says, oh man, wrong door, buddy. We can go, no, look. Here's my resume. Look at all this stuff I did. and never changed and suffered through so that I could get up here and go to church all day, every day for eternity.
Get out.
Can we retain freedom? And can we trust ourselves enough to let go of something when it's not working, no matter how many people it works for?
And here we are.
And here we are, doing exactly that. I would suggest that a big chunk of institutional religion is failing because they can't grow. It also can't listen. But the only reason you would lock yourself in a life of not having fun would be because you would expect something better would be waiting down the road. But would that even be worth it? Can you die without ever having lived? Yeah, people do it every day. Every day. Do you want to get to that place where Erin's coming to visit you?
Only if it's her.
And the end is near, right? And you're going, and you're thinking, man, I should have tried fruitcake.
When you make your bucket list.
That's right, that's right. No, you need to try the fruitcake. Who was the only person Jesus, the only people, what kind of people were the only people Jesus was ever critical of?
Pharisees.
Hypocritical religious leaders of his day. Never ever said, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. In fact, what he said to the religious leaders of his day was, you're putting too big a burden on people's back, and that's why you get to this, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And the funny thing is, the people that put those burdens on others never seem to put them on themselves.
Not good.
Well, I mean, know that I'm doing it private. So, if there's a message to have a beer with Jesus, it's not that Jesus is likely to show up at the bar. Well,
And two of us again.
oh yeah. When two of us are gathered, Jesus will be there, but he's not picking up the tab, is he?
So weird.
The message is, spirituality is about engaging life and not running from it. It's about being intentional. I mean, that's what practice is about. But it's not about being afraid. It's not about avoiding something bad that might one day happen. And we can argue which is worse, you know. The traditional image of the fires of hell. You've heard the story about the guy that goes to hell, and the devil says, I'm going to show you 3 rooms,
Oh, yeah.
and you get to pick one.
That's wonderful.
But once you pick one, that's it. Takes him to the first one. It's a big basketball floor, wooden basketball floor. And everybody's standing on their head. The guy goes, all right, I'll see the next one. Down the hallway next door. Concrete floor. Everybody's standing on their head. The guy goes, all right, I'll look at number 3. Number 3, everybody's standing up knee deep in horse shit, drinking coffee. And the guy says, well, you know, my uncle was a farmer. You kind of get used to the smell after a while, and I really like coffee. I'll take room number 3. The devil says, are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. Room number 3. Okay. Devil steps out, locks the door. Voice comes over the loudspeaker. Coffee breaks over. Back on your heads.
I think that's actually what I hear.
But at least there was coffee.
True.
So which is worse? Never living in the hopes of spending eternity in the church, or living and maybe it smells a little bad now.
I don't know.
I'm going for